Welcome to What We Really Want, conversations about connection. Settle in and get ready for a great conversation. Let's talk about what we really want.
Hey friends, welcome back to What We Really Want. This is Greg with a re-release episode. If you've been listening since the beginning or near the beginning, you may find this one familiar. This is a re-release of episode 6, Recovery Intensives. We released it back in the spring last year, and our guests were Adam Calvert, James Horne, and Jason McNaughton, 3 friends and therapists who staff our Roots Retreat Men's Recovery Intensive. Putting this episode out again because we get a lot of questions about the Roots Retreat. What is it for? What's the benefit for somebody who's in recovery? And we think from time to time, and rather than reinvent the wheel, have the discussion again, it'd be good just to repost these episodes. Just so you know, we have a Roots Retreat Men's Recovery Intensive coming up November 6th through the 9th here in Birmingham, Alabama, and registration is open for that weekend. So if you need info, go to awakenrecovery.com/Roots Retreat, and you can find out everything you need to know. In the meantime, we hope that you will enjoy either for the first time or the next time this conversation we have with Adam, James, and Jason on recovery intensives. It starts right now. I am fully aware of what I've got myself into.
Yeah, these will shock us, right? If we,
we're going to get this on one take.
Well, yeah, we are.
Are we going to do an arriving exercise, James?
Sure. My arriving exercise is that I have a drink.
Role models, every single one of us. Let's do this thing. How about it?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's
Adam Calvert, James Horne, Jason McNaughton. Welcome, friends, to What We Really Want. How weird does it feel like me being this formal?
Yeah, it's pretty weird. It does not feel normal.
It doesn't feel normal. The listeners, you got to know, these are 3 of the most special people in my life. We have worked together for years and love each other very much. And we normally don't sit around in quite this formal a setting with microphones. And so we're hopefully going to just forget that they're here, just enjoy talking with each other. And I'm really looking forward to it. And so with that in mind, let me ask you guys, what do you want? What do you really want out of this conversation that we're about to have?
I think I want to start walking around with microphones and talking more formally.
Yeah. Kind of feels powerful, doesn't it?
It really does. It feels very natural.
Now, I was thinking about this on the way here, and I was enjoying, just as James and I were talking, just remembering when I was seeing Adam as a client, actually. Adam was the counselor, I was the client, to going to my first intensive. And so it really is, for me, remembering what that was like, being grateful for where I am now, but then grateful for the friendships that have come out of this journey.
How about you, James? What do you really want?
As Jason and I were talking about this coming over here, I was thinking about the conversations that I've had with people when I'm thinking an intensive would be helpful for them. What I hope for is to be able to communicate the impact that an intensive can have, how much it's had for me and how much I've seen it have on other people as well.
Well, I think for me, I want us to talk about some of the fears that people have or the misconceptions people have about intensives. Because, the word itself is a little intimidating. Intensive.
Yeah.
And just notice that, it is scary, but so impactful that I'll tell people, you're going to be uncomfortable for a few minutes, but your system really starts to calm and it feels safe at an intensive. And so, over the years doing these intensives, and you just see the impact.
Well, we're going to get to all of that in a few minutes, but just before that, I want to give people listening an opportunity to get to know you guys a little bit. And so I just wondered if each of you would take a minute just to talk about kind of what the path for each of you looked like in becoming a counselor.
Well, I sure wasn't planning on being a counselor. My first career was in the military, and what led me to being a counselor was my own recovery journey. And initially it was, whether it was struggling with alcohol or struggling with my relationships or sex or depression or those types of things, I knew I needed some help, and I didn't know, what that was going to look like. And long story short, I resigned my commission and went on my own recovery journey. And after having experiences in counseling and intensives and inpatient treatment, I said, I want to be a part of being on the other side of this, of being able to give back a lot of the love that I received when I was in that place.
Thanks, James.
Gosh, the road to becoming a counselor. So I had wanted to be in some type of a helps type profession for a while after becoming a believer in college. Thought it was ministry. Wasn't ministry. Went to, I guess, about a year of seminary. It was a fit, but it wasn't a fit. And then I think my acting out behavior kept me, or God's hand, I don't know, kept me out of finishing seminary. My behavior escalated with sexually acting out. And then through a crazy round of circumstances, met Adam. And that was the beginning of really understanding for myself and talking with someone who really understood what was happening, what was going on with me. And then as I started to get, I guess about a year in, 6 months to a year in through the counseling process, shared with Adam one day, like, hey, I think I want to become a counselor. And Adam said, man, there's no way you can do that. Because you are so broken.
You're so broken. No one will ever listen to you.
He said, bless your heart.
No, but he was open to listening to that. I remember being so nervous that day that I went in there to talk to you about that. And then he said, hey, why don't you, just sign up for a class and see how that goes. And so we had that discussion about once a month for many months.
Yeah, I got a little impatient. I don't know if you noticed that.
So I finally was like, you know what? Prayed and talked to Tracy and had actually gone to several intensives by that point. Signed up for class and continued the journey. And and then many years later, because I was working full time, became a counselor.
Well, it's a little different. Mine came from utter failure.
That doesn't sound different so
that
far.
Would be the same.
We're tracking so far.
Different kind of failure.
That's about it. But no, growing up in the ministry, my dad's a pastor, and so I grew up in the ministry, and I did not want to be a preacher, but I felt like I was supposed to do some type of ministry. And so instead of doing that, I got degrees in business, marketing. I have a master's in public relations. So I did all these things to run from what I was supposed to do. And so I got into those careers and utterly failed out of those. And so I was doing some post-grad work at Mississippi State, and I was sitting in my little house in Starkville, completely alone, and utterly at my rock bottom of, okay, if I'm going to be a preacher, okay, I will be a preacher, but I will not be a happy preacher. And
too many of those already.
So I was reading this letter from my grandmother about, I don't know, she was trying to encourage me, but she had written Jeremiah 29:11 through 13 in it. And I guess I read it like I always read verses, but this time I actually felt those verses. I don't think I'd ever really felt verses before, but I felt that. And I guess I got curious about it and like, okay, there is evidently a plan, and this is not it that I'm on. So I was talking to my parents. My mom was a writer, and her publisher lived in Birmingham and was friends with a therapist in Birmingham. So I met him to talk about counseling. I didn't know anything about counseling, and even though my mom was a type of counselor, we as a family did not participate in counseling. So anyway, I talked to him. We have a good connection. I go back to Starkville and I call him to thank him, because that's what you're polite. You call and say thank you for seeing me and that kind of thing. Well, I left him a message, and his boss saw the message and called me. And she said, "Hey, this is Louise, and you don't remember me, but I used to babysit you when you were 4.
Whoa.
And so I've heard that you're interested in counseling. And so you'll come to UAB and you will get your degree and you'll work for us and we'll help you through school." And that's what happened. And so
Wow.
I finally, when I surrendered, sitting in my because I lived in this little house that had, the only place that I could really stay warm was in this little bathroom that I had, because I was studying, and I would sit on my little toilet with my little TV tray and try and study.
Wow.
And in that moment, I just surrendered. I'm like, okay, Lord, I can't keep doing what I've been doing. And so I came to UAB and started school, and the doors started opening, and I became a play therapist and worked with children for a few years. And so that's kind of my journey into it. I've not had a sexual addiction, but when I learned about sexual addiction recovery, I fell in love with the population. I fell in love with the work. I fell in love with the whole process. And it was like, this is what I want to do.
As I'm sitting here thinking about all of our interactions with each other, I'm thinking, I've got names of men that I know that are kind of like Rolodexing through my head right now. Men who have seen Adam, men who have seen Jason, men who have seen James, and like whose lives are healthier and better, because of that being a part of their process and God using the work that they did with you men. And so I think it's incredible, the intersection of so many people who have loved sexually broken people so well. And so I'm grateful to be friends with y'all, grateful to get to work with you. It's really kind of mind-blowing that we have gotten to do this work at the Roots Retreat together so many times. Because we've had, at the time we're recording this, we've had 25 men's intensives. The way that the Roots Retreat actually happens now is largely because of that collaboration. I'm sure that we'll talk about that later. But speaking about, just kind of following up on something all three of you talked about, was working with sexually addicted clients your plan early on, or something that you wanted? Like, did you discover along the way that this was an area where you had a lot of passion or skill or interest, or did you know all along that this was a way that you wanted to help people once you went into counseling? We'll be right back.
How have things gotten so out of control? How did something that didn't seem like such a big deal at first completely take over? Porn and sex addiction are destroying your life and killing your relationships. You know you can't keep going on like this, keeping secrets and telling lies. Something has to change. But how? Most men who struggle with unwanted or addictive sexual behavior have tried to fix it on their own. But sex addiction is powerful and complicated. Recovery is possible, but it isn't easy. It requires us to focus on more than just behavior. It requires us to look at our whole lives and the parts of our stories that contribute to addiction. If you're ready to find freedom, maybe it's time for you to get to the roots. The Roots Retreat is a 4-day therapeutic and spiritual intensive. You'll work with therapists and coaches who specialize in sex addiction and recovery. You'll learn how to take healthy ownership of your behavior. You'll discover how your life experiences set the stage for addiction to develop. You'll see how God factors into your struggle, and you'll learn effective tools for ongoing recovery after the retreat. If you're ready to stop trying what doesn't work, if you're ready to experience real hope, healing, and change, let's get to the roots.
Visit awakenrecovery.com/Roots Retreat or click the Roots Retreat link in show notes.
When I went into counseling for myself for my sexual addiction, and then went into inpatient treatment, I had so much shame. And one of the things that I experienced in going through inpatient treatment was understanding the underlying issues that allowed me to understand that no wonder I did what I did. And when I experienced the relief from that shame and the understanding that a desire was for connection, I wanted to work with people who struggled with that shame and didn't understand why they did what they did. And so that it, in one sense, it drew me to working with people with sexual brokenness, but more, it drew me to want to work with what's going on underneath and help, regardless of what you're struggling with, to help people have more of an understanding of those foundational issues.
Yeah, and piggybacking on that, I would say that is where Adam helped me in the beginning, was not so much, hey, here is sexual addiction, but more of the underlying trauma, complex developmental trauma, family of origin trauma, and just the shame that I carried was the catalyst for the adaptive behaviors, maladaptive behaviors. And so I don't think it was my plan to work with sexual addiction per se, or sexual brokenness, as much as it was, like James is saying, to work with what causes that. And so I still wouldn't say that that's where I work, but it is. Right? If I see 8 people in a day, 6 people are coming in and that's the symptom, but I don't treat the symptom. I treat person and, the shame that is the catalyst for that.
And I think that's what drew me in early on. Cause I mean, I didn't know anything about it, until I went and studied it. But then I realized, especially because I mainly work with men, it's like we didn't have a safe place to talk about, our sexual behaviors.
Right.
But also how they developed. And so providing a safe place to be able to talk about that level of intimacy, that level of, pain or trauma or whatever else is going on, that's what drew me even closer to it.
Well, the fact that all 3 of you have said a version of, I'm not here to deal with sexual brokenness. I'm here to deal with what's underneath it. That to me is one of the reasons why I'm so drawn and aligned with you and why we're so close, right? But there's something about this manifestation, Jason, to use your word, that's so powerful, because once you're known in a community as someone who works with sexual addiction or sexual brokenness, word gets around, right? And once the reputation goes that this is a person who is helpful for people with this type of struggle in their life, then, eventually, like it's not that hard to fill your calendar. So what is it about sexual brokenness that, I mean, you've all kind of said a version of it. It could be this, it could be that, it could be, a number of different manifestations. What is it about sexual brokenness that's so negatively powerful in a person's life as opposed to some of those other things?
That's a really heavy question.
Yeah, for starters, there hasn't really been a safe place to talk about that. The church has not, in general, been a safe place. In fact, that becomes a breeding ground and a hiding place. I've been members of plenty of men's liars groups where men will just pretend to be,
AKA accountability groups.
right? Accountability groups are vulnerable,
Right.
And so, yeah, I guess to be a landing spot in a safe place it is a draw for me.
How many times do you hear people saying something to the effect of, this is the first time I've ever been able to talk about this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Often.
Very common.
So when there's something that somebody can't talk about, right? And I know that we could apply this to anything. If you are struggling with alcohol or drug abuse, if you're struggling with disordered eating, if you're struggling with, disordered sexuality, whatever it is that is a compulsive struggle, you're going to feel shame about that. I think culturally there are some of those things we're talking more about. And even in the church, we talk more about people who struggle with alcohol. Again, that's not, sexual brokenness and addiction was my personal struggle. I didn't struggle with alcohol or drugs, So I make up a story in my head that if it was I might think, well, at least I know and I've heard stories about other people who've been through this. Am I totally off on that there's something about the silence of being able to talk through sexual things that just gives it such a stronghold of secrecy in people's lives?
I do think that's true, but it's also important to remember, like, we are made in God's image, and we are made for connection and intimacy. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's foundational.
Yeah, we are sexual beings, but a lot of times our sexuality is harmed at such a young age, and it's never really talked about. And then it becomes a way to cope, and we use it to cope. Well, then there's shame around our sexuality, and then it's not talked about, and it's continued to not be talked about, and so there must be something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think having that safe place to talk about what is your sexuality like, what was your development like, just starting there and recognizing, okay, this coping mechanism kind of wrapped itself around a beautiful part of you. And so the healing process is unwrapping these coping mechanisms and letting that sexuality that is a beautiful part of us to live and breathe and be how it's created to be.
Well said.
Jason, you were talking a few minutes ago about how, the track record of the church is not just saturated with healthy conversations about sexuality.
Right.
Historically, I think we're getting better.
Yes.
And I'm glad for that. I think we still have a lot of progress to make. The question that just came to me is this: if you had a pastor come to you and say, "Hey, I really want to do better in how I shepherd people in my congregation who are experiencing sexual brokenness," like, if you could just tell me one place to start, what do you think you'd want to say to them?
Well, what I usually say is, what do you know about you? What do you know about your sexuality, your sexual self? What is your story?
Mm-hmm.
Because they've got to be comfortable with their own story before they can really hold or hear anyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually where I start. And the pastors that are really genuine will come back and talk about it.
Yeah, I would say same thing Adam's saying, but a little bit different words, is to lead with brokenness. We were talking about this earlier. You have to be able to metabolize shame, and to lead with brokenness, you have to know your own story. You have to know Jesus, not about him, is where grace comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of the pastors that I have experienced having done their work or doing their work or aware of that, and I'm so drawn to them. And knowing that it's not easy, because there's just so much pressure to have it together. And so when any pastor chooses to go into their own heart, I just have so much respect.
Well, because it's not only hard to be a Christian in church who's struggling with a compulsive behavior, it's hard to be a pastor. It's hard to be a pastor, period. It's hard to be a pastor who sins and doesn't feel like this is a safe place for it to be known that I still sin. And one of the questions that I've had for pastors who have talked to me is, do you feel like the church where you work is a safe place for you to talk about your stuff? And usually they laugh when I ask them that. And I just say, I'm interested in hearing about that laugh. And they're like, yeah, I don't know if anybody could really handle that. And so what you end up with, or what I've observed, is a lot of pastors who really may want to go deep, but as deep as they feel safe to go is to talk about their own sin in the hypothetical or the vague past tense. Back when I used to struggle with. And I think you're all onto something huge, because every single time I have had a person who worried, if this is known, then I'm going to lose my position, or people will not want to hear what I have to say. They won't respect me anymore. That's the common belief. Yeah. And what the outcome is almost always the opposite. Whether it's a parent who is afraid to apologize to their kid, or a pastor who's afraid to be vulnerable to their congregation, people want to know it's not us and them, but you are like me. for a pastor who's afraid to let his congregation know that he struggles, like that's going to be a cup of cold water to them to know that their leader struggles. Like, oh my gosh, you too. So, that gives me hope. Okay, let's talk about intensives. We all know what that word means in the context of what we do, but for the listener who doesn't know what an intensive is, how would you define or describe a recovery intensive?
I'll take a shot at it. So an intensive, and we were talking about earlier how it's an intimidating word in itself, but it is intense in the sense that it's a focused amount of time, whether it's 3 days or a week. You have set aside time for yourself to be able to explore either individually or with others what is going on underneath your behaviors, and understanding an opportunity to understand more about yourself.
You spend that time and you're uncovering things, but you have time in an intensive to also recognize your protective mechanisms, your protective parts that are showing up. And you have time to hear those and also hear other people's stories, because a lot of times the lie is I'm the only one who has this issue, or I'm the only one who believes this, or, and so in an intensive like Roots, you're hearing other stories and there is a relatability to those. So you don't feel as alone. And you start to notice that people actually lean in instead of lean out. So that's the beauty of intensives, is it just gives you a space to just be, where sometimes, a 50-minute hour once a week or every other week just isn't able to get there as quickly as an intensive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, we call ours the Roots Retreat, but there's not a whole lot of retreating happening. It's intense to get to know yourself in a different way than how you've related to yourself most of your life or your whole life. It's difficult. It's freeing. It's rewarding, life-changing. Yeah, I don't think I would be here if it, like literally, I think I'd be dead if it weren't for the intensives that I've been to.
I was looking up the definition, or some of the definitions of the word intense, and one of them is highly concentrated.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's a really appropriate perspective on intensity of what we do at a weekend like this. Yeah. Adam, you were talking about the 50 minutes, and when that time is up, sometimes when it just feels like you're getting to something really important, how frustrating is that for you as a counselor?
Extremely.
When I started attending intensives and then actually helping staff intensives, I had to record that for hours for supervision. And in a 4-day intensive, there are 32 contact hours with a therapist. 32. And if you look at that, if you come every other week, that's more than a year's worth of counseling.
On top of that, to the point you made, Adam, is you're hearing other people and you're witnessing and holding space with other people who are doing their work at the same time. And you're getting the benefit of multiple perspectives.
Right.
And it's so incredible.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, just about the 50-minute hour. One thing that I've recognized is that if you're going into a 50-minute hour, first you're having to transition from whatever's going on in your world, drop down for 50 minutes, and then recognize that probably about 15 minutes before you leave, you're preparing yourself to go back into your world, whether it be work or whether it be at home in a relationship. And so there's an immersion that you're able to experience in an intensive where you're able to let that guard down for an extended amount of time. And I think that benefit is it's hard to quantify the experience that someone has when they have the ability to do that.
And so when we let that guard down, the goal is much more than, okay, with your guard down and with you paying attention, we're going to teach you all the great tactics for how to quit doing the behavior you've been doing, right? I mean, a lot of people think that's what you do. You go for a weekend and we're going to teach you how to not look at porn anymore. And that's what some weekends focus on. But that's not what we do. I think we would all probably agree that, it's important to know destructive behavior needs to be modified, because as long as we're doing certain things, we're keeping that fog and that chaos in our lives. But if behavior change isn't the primary point of an intensive, what is the point? You've already kind of talked about it, but let's just put a tip on it here. What is the point, and what is the relationship between behavior and the deeper goals of doing that kind of work?
I think one of the main points, as we've talked about earlier, is to get to what's driving force, what's going on underneath. But a point that I mean, we've talked a little bit about as well is what we've recognized underneath sex addiction is often a desire for true intimate connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the experiences that they're able to have is true intimate connection with others for an extended amount of time, to be known and to know others. And I think that is one piece that I hope a person has an experience of when I invite them to go to an intensive.
Obviously what James is saying, and then to also develop a different relationship with themselves, to see where that maladaptive or adaptive behaviors, not where they came from, but really like an aha or an understanding, like, oh, no wonder I do what I do. No wonder I have done what I have done because of the trauma that I have experienced in my life. I just remember going to the first intensive I went to, how important that was. Like, oh, wait a minute. This wasn't because the behavior became my identity. And so it really is starting to, the beginning, and a good intensive is the beginning of an identity change. That's when recovery becomes discovery. Like, who am I really? And I'm not my behaviors.
Yeah, I love it when James talks about the human being instead of human doing. And I think that at an intensive, you start to learn how to be, in the busyness of life. And sometimes, coming in for an hour to see your therapist, you sometimes aren't able to develop that. But in an intensive, it's talked about, it's practiced, it's nurtured. Even in that, 3.5 day, 4 day time frame, you start to see evidence of who I can actually be. And you have time to experience that. So when you go back into the real world, you leave that cocoon, you have some understanding of self, more so than you did when you came in. And so that's what I love to experience is, that initial awkwardness, and everybody gets there, and how kind of timid and kind of, you start to recognize all their protective mechanisms in place, but by the end of it, it's so amazing.
But I'll tell you, I think about all of the protest and resistance that I see early on in that process, because some of the things that y'all have said, James, and you said earlier about when you went into treatment and you recognize how much of your life events made your behavior make sense. And, when we're like, okay, let's get to know and have a different relationship with ourselves. You just can see sometimes the heads start shaking. And because I think as Christians particularly, how many of us, when we've been confronted about something and we're trying to explain the context, we'll hear some version of, it doesn't matter why you did it. You just shouldn't have done it. Right? And that message sticks. Mm-hmm. And it absolutely matters why we did it. Because if we don't know why we did it, we're going to keep doing it. Because the reasons why, and I'm not saying that we discover those reasons so that we can avoid taking responsibility. It's the exact opposite. We come to that discovery so that we can take healthy ownership. I say all the time, you can't own something that you don't understand. But when you start to see the resistance to that drop, and, Andy Gullahorn, who's been a guest on the podcast and is with us on most of the Roots retreats, I'll never forget something he said. He said it now a few times. When people go to things like that and they start sharing their stories, they're expecting you to say, shame on you. But then you say, well, of course. Yeah, no wonder. That's so, no wonder. That is so disorienting. To be expecting shaming from somebody else and to get love. Mm-hmm. How powerful that is. My gosh, it gives me chills every time I get to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. So a question for you guys as we're thinking about it, because we get to do this pretty often now. I mean, we do these things 4 times a year, and again, not everybody's always there, but we've been to a whole bunch of these. As a therapist, what are your favorite things that you get to experience, you personally, as you go through these intensives with the participants?
I think that for me, it's actually seeing change from day one to when a man leaves. Mm-hmm. Because, again, if you see someone once a week or every other week, there's change, but you don't get to witness it in such a short amount of time. And to actually see someone's countenance change, the way they hold themselves and carry themselves from this posture of shame or anger to just more of an openness and I don't know really how to explain it, but they just look different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not every man. Mm-hmm. There's usually a handful out of 12. Mm-hmm. And that's such an honor to be able to have been a part of it, and to see that is really a huge blessing.
I think over the years, because I had to get comfortable seeing the struggle, allowing the struggle, and not wanting to rescue it, you know. But in my own strengthening, I guess, my own maturity as a counselor, I guess, I can allow, you know, I see the struggle, and now I actually, this may sound kind of weird, but I enjoy seeing the struggle in these guys. You know, they're struggling, they're working it out, they're having the internal battles, but they're letting others in that battle with them. And so just experiencing the struggle with them and not fixing it, but just being there.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things. The other is just being, you know, with these guys that I love and don't get to see that often, you know, as much. We're all busy, but, you know, I love that, the camaraderie of it. But
what you just said about sitting and watching people struggle and not diving in to rescue them from that, I think it's important that we mention that one of the reasons why that works, if I can use that word, is because we personally believe so strongly that to be free to struggle, safe to struggle through it, every participant has to know that they have a say. And the concept of consent is super, super important. People who are listening to this, who have thought about doing an intensive, probably these horror pictures that are going on in your head, they're going to make us do these things. It's going to be like frat hazing, or, you know, it's going to be terrifying. Like, we don't make anybody do anything. That's right. We give invitations throughout the entire weekend to all of the exercises. We make sure that they know that they have a no that will be listened to, because if they don't, then their yes can't really be voluntary. And we try to reinforce that from the beginning so that they feel the space where they can sit in that struggle. I just think that's really important. I mean, we all know that, but people who haven't been to something like this don't know that. And I think that's one of the things that hopefully could alleviate some of the fear and the reticence to go to something like this.
I think of kids like learning how to swim and how scary that can be. And I think of just the counselors that you guys that you know, we work together to be the lifeguards. Like, these guys are coming in and they're going to do something. They're going to be invited into something, and being those lifeguards to be able to oversee the process, but also participate in the process and watch someone trust the process, trust God, trust us. And when they have never been able to trust before in their lives, and they have sworn that they will never trust, and they allow themselves to, that is, to me, the courage in that, the going from like a darkness to light, it's palpable. And that's one that really stands out for me.
Yeah, Jason, I can remember at one of the intensives a couple of years ago, we were doing an exercise where, you know, we're kind of guiding and facilitating the men through the work that they're doing. And we're saying, well, would you be open to doing this? And sometimes we'll make suggestions. Sometimes we'll ask them. And there is somebody that said, nope. And it's just like, I'm delighted when they know. Like sometimes they'll sit and think about it for a minute, but sometimes they instantaneously like, yep, that's what I want to do. Or no, get you can just back off, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the very first time they've ever spoken up for themselves.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's thrilling. I don't know how it is for you guys. For me, it is thrilling to see somebody speaking up for themselves for the first time.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, to see that agency start to come online.
Yeah. And when we say agency, what we mean is,
Well, the way that I've understood it to mean is first, it's more of an awareness of what's going on with me internally. That often what I find that I do is, and what children do is life happens to them and they really don't have a choice. They just react to it. And as adults, as we start to gain that internal awareness of what's going on within us when something happens externally, and it's that space that we're able to have to notice what's happening, and then we can respond as opposed to react. But it's beginning to just have that awareness of, wow, what is going on within me? And then having a choice of how I want to respond.
and think about carrying that process that you just described back into my daily life and recognizing that I can learn how to do that in situations where I've just been autopiloting, right? Or feeling under the control of another person, feeling under the control of my addiction, but saying, I get to choose, and how powerful that is. And for the Christian, the ability to say, I get a choice, that choice can be to believe that God is who he says he is, that God loves me, that God wants to take care of me so that I don't have to be the sole provider and meter of my own needs. I mean, I get to choose to believe that too. And it's so thrilling that having had the chance to unplug, get into a place where you can slow the pace down and do that work, and maybe for the first time learn, oh, this is what that would be like. I've been around people, I've been in recovery for 15 years. I've been around plenty of people who have recovered, healed, discovered their true selves, who have not gone to an intensive. It's not mandatory, for somebody to get better. But for those who have gone, it was so catalytic to connecting those dots, in some cases faster, or giving that clarity in a way that they didn't get in those other contexts. So it's such a privilege to get to be a part of those. And just as we're finishing up, I just want to say, Adam, James, Jason, having gotten to do so many of these weekends with you, I hope that we just keep doing them until we're all like old men who can barely stand.
I'm already there.
Will me in.
Yeah. So they'll just, we'll just prop us up and keep doing it. But I love all three of y'all. I'm so grateful to get to be partners and team members with you in these weekends. And I hope we get to do them forever. And just for people who are interested in finding more about that, we've obviously every episode we have links in the show notes for our website, for the Roots Retreat, so you can always find out information about that. If you're someone who needs the type of intensive that's outside the scope of what Awaken offers, contact us and we'll try to help you find the type of experience that will be helpful. If that's Roots Retreat, that's fantastic. If it's something else, that's great too. We want to be just a resource for you in answering questions or getting you the help that you need. So I think that this conversation is going to help a lot of people get maybe a little bit of a relief from the fear of considering something like this. Adam and Jason and James, thank y'all for helping with that. Thanks for being my friends. Thanks for coming over to my house and having a conversation tonight.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us.
Love you guys.
Yeah, love you too.
Love you too.
We'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, feedback, topics you'd like to hear us talk about on the show, click the Send Us a Message link in the show notes of any episode.